They say the screams could be heard for miles. Summer of 1462. You are an Ottoman soldier in the most powerful army on earth. You conquered Constantinople, shattered the Byzantine Empire. You are marching toward a minor prince named Vlad of Wallachia to crush a rebellion that should take weeks. Then you smell it. Death, putrefaction, something else you cannot name. Your column slows. The scouts have stopped moving. And as you round the hill near the capital, you see a forest. But the trees are not trees, they are human beings. 20,000 of your brothers raised into the sky on wooden poles arranged in geometric rows. Some died weeks ago, their bodies swollen and black. Others still move, still breathe, still scream. Your Sultan, the man who conquered Byzantium, takes one look and turns his entire army around. What kind of mind creates something like this? And here is the part that should terrify you. This was not madness, it was strategy, cold, calculated, and horribly effective. The story you think you know about Vlad the Impaler is not exactly a lie, but the truth is much worse. This is how one man transformed human suffering into such an effective weapon that he changed the course of empires. And the real horror was not what he did to bodies, but what he did to minds. Let us start with a question that no one asks. What breaks a human being so completely as to make him capable of this? The year is 1442. Vlad is 11 years old. His father, Vlad II Dracul, has just made a pact with Sultan Murad II of the Ottoman Empire. The pact is simple. Vlad II keeps the throne of Wallachia. In return, he gives his two youngest sons as hostages. So young Vlad and his brother Radu are taken from their homes and delivered to the heart of the Ottoman Empire. Not as prisoners in dungeons, but as guests. They receive elegant training. They learn Turkish, Arabic, philosophy, and the Quran. Apparently it is a privilege. But here is what history books skip. This was not instruction, it was psychological warfare. Vlad spent his formative years, from 11 to 17, observing his captors, studying the art of building an empire. He studied how the Ottomans used fear as a tool of government. He witnessed public executions designed not merely to punish, but to traumatize entire populations into submission. He learned that terror, if applied with surgical precision, was more effective than any army. He also learned something else. He was completely powerless. While his younger brother Radu formed a close friendship with Prince Mehmed, Vlad refused to bow. According to Ottoman records, he was often punished for his defiance. Some accounts suggest he was beaten, possibly tortured. Either something fundamental broke inside him during those years, or perhaps more precisely, something crystallized. He developed what modern psychologists might define as a persecution complex, combined with an obsessive need for control. But he channeled it. He studied every punishment he witnessed, memorized every torture. He was building an arsenal, piece by piece. In 1448, Vlad finally returned to Wallachia. He was 17. 2 months later, his father was murdered by rival boyars. His older brother Mircea was buried alive. Vlad was alone, surrounded by enemies. And that is where the story becomes interesting. He did not just want revenge. He wanted to recreate the world in the image of his trauma. He would take everything the Ottomans had taught him about terror and evolve it into something they had never seen before. But first, he had to wait. For 6 years, Vlad lived in exile, plotting, planning, studying. And in 1456, with Hungarian support, he finally claimed the throne of Wallachia. The monster was about to be born. Vlad's coronation feast in 1456 should have been a celebration. Instead, he set the template for everything that followed. He invited the families of the boyars, the same nobility that had orchestrated his father's murder and buried his brother alive. Hundreds arrived in their finest clothes, convinced they were there to swear loyalty. The great hall was decorated, wine flowed freely. Then, in the middle of the feast, Vlad stood and asked a simple question. "How many princes of Wallachia have you lived through?" The oldest boyar answered proudly, 7, 10. Some claimed to remember a dozen different rulers, boasting of their survival. Vlad smiled. Then he gave an order. Every boyar who answered was arrested on the spot, but it is here that the methodical nature of his cruelty becomes clear. He divided them into two groups based on age and health. The oldest were impaled immediately outside the palace walls. Not in a hurry. The stakes were positioned carefully to avoid vital organs, ensuring they died slowly over hours or days. The younger and stronger boyars and their families were forced to march 80 kilometers north to the ruins of Poenari fortress. There, they faced a choice that was not a choice. Rebuild the fortress with bare hands or die. For months, they hauled stones up the mountainside. Most died during construction. The survivors were never the same. Vlad had effectively erased the old nobility and replaced it with a new class that owed him everything and lived in terror. This was not just revenge. It was a systematic dismantling of the power structure, and it revealed something crucial. He did not just want obedience. He wanted to break people so completely that obedience became their only possible response. But this was still internal politics. What Vlad did next would shake empires. In 1459, Sultan Mehmed II sent envoys to Wallachia asking for the annual tribute. The request was accompanied by an insult. Vlad should personally present himself in Constantinople to renew his oath of vassalage. The envoys arrived expecting the usual political theater. What they received was a taste of hell. When they entered Vlad's court, they refused to remove their turbans, claiming religious tradition. Vlad asked them to explain their tradition. They did, probably assuming he seemed interested. Vlad nodded thoughtfully. Then he said something that must have frozen their blood. "I respect a man who honors his faith so completely. Let me help you honor it forever." He ordered his guards to nail the turbans directly to their skulls. Think about the precision of that cruelty. He did not kill them. He did it in a way that was symbolically charged, calculated to ensure they survived the journey back to Constantinople. They were walking messages. Their screams echoed through the countryside as they fled toward the Sultan. When Mehmed received his envoys, permanently disfigured and half mad from pain, he immediately understood this was not the childhood friend he remembered. This was something that had taken Ottoman lessons on terror and transformed them into something even the Ottomans had not imagined. War was inevitable. But before it broke out, Vlad had other messages to send. Here is what most people do not understand about impalement. It was not just an execution, it was engineering. The common image, a stake thrust straight up through the torso, would have killed almost instantly. This defeats the entire purpose. Vlad's method was much more sophisticated and infinitely more cruel. Based on contemporary descriptions, this is how it really worked. First, the victim was laid face down. The stake, carefully selected, rounded at the tip and well-oiled, was inserted through the rectum. But here is the crucial part. It was inserted at an angle specifically calculated to avoid all major organs and blood vessels. The victim was then slowly raised to a vertical position, and gravity did the rest. Over hours or sometimes days, the body's own weight gradually pushed the pole upward through the chest cavity. The path was calculated to avoid the heart, lungs, and major arteries. The victim could remain alive for up to 3 days. Why this method? Because Vlad had understood something that modern psychological warfare studies now confirm. Witnessing prolonged suffering is exponentially more traumatic than witnessing rapid death. A decapitation is horrible, but brief. Impalement was a spectacle that lasted days, with screams that could be heard across entire valleys. But physical torture was just one component. The real genius lay in the staging. When Vlad impaled victims, he did so in public squares, along main roads, at city gates, wherever visibility would be maximized. He understood that word of mouth would multiply the psychological impact far beyond the actual number of victims. He also used symbolism constantly. The impalement stakes had different heights based on rank. Peasants were placed close to the ground, nobles higher up, the highest positions reserved for enemy commanders. In some cases, Vlad arranged the victims around his palace according to geometric patterns. Circles, stars, concentric rings. This was not sadism. It was a demonstration of control. He was saying, "I have so much power that I can turn human suffering into art." There is a Saxon pamphlet from 1462 describing Vlad dining among the impaled. It claims he set up a table in the middle of a field of steaks, that he consumed his meal surrounded by the dying. Whether this specific incident happened exactly as described is debatable. But what is not debatable is the psychological message. I am so far beyond your understanding of human limits that your horror does not touch me. But here is the question nobody asks. Was all this working? Was terror really an effective strategy? The answer came in the summer of 1462. At the beginning of 1462, Vlad not only refused to pay tribute, but also launched raids into Ottoman territory. In one particularly brutal campaign, he killed over 23,000 people. He even kept a death count, classifying victims according to age and gender. Mehmed, who had conquered Constantinople at 21, decided to personally deal with the Wallachian problem. In spring of 1462, he assembled an army estimated between 60,000 and 90,000 men. Vlad had perhaps 20,000 to 30,000 men total, many of them farmers conscripted with minimal training. A conventional battle would have been a massacre, so Vlad refused to give them a conventional battle. When the Ottoman army entered Wallachia, they found nothing. Empty villages, poisoned wells, burnt fields. Every potential source of food and water had been systematically destroyed. Vlad had ordered his people to abandon their homes, retreat into forests and mountains. The Ottomans were hungry, confused, and exposed, and the attacks came at night. Vlad had trained specialized units in guerrilla warfare. Small groups attacked the Ottoman camps in darkness, killing hundreds, burning supplies, disappearing before any organized response. They targeted officers, supply animals, ammunition depots. The goal was not to defeat the army, it was to make it paranoid, exhausted, and demoralized. But the real masterstroke came on the night of June 17th, 1462. Vlad personally led a force of about 10,000 men in what became known as the night attack. Under cover of darkness, they infiltrated the massive Ottoman encampment with a single objective: kill the Sultan. Contemporary accounts describe absolute chaos. The Wallachians wore captured Ottoman uniforms and knew enough Turkish to create confusion. They set fire to tents, stampeded horses, and targeted the Sultan's pavilion. They came within meters of Mehmed himself, but the Janissaries formed a defensive wall around their leader. After hours of close combat, Vlad ordered retreat, and his men disappeared into the night. The Ottoman casualties were relatively light, perhaps 2,000 dead. But the psychological damage was catastrophic. The Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, in the middle of his own army, was nearly killed by an enemy vastly outnumbered. Mehmed's confidence was shattered, his soldiers were exhausted. Then they reached the capital and saw what Vlad had prepared for them. No written description can fully capture what Mehmed's army encountered approaching Targovist at the end of June 1462. As you approach the Wallachian capital, the smell hits you first. If you have ever smelled a dead animal rotting in summer heat, multiply it by thousands. Then add the sweet, nauseating stench of human flesh in decay. It is so dense you can taste it. Then you see them, the first one, then 10, then 100. Then you realize there is no end. They stretch to the horizon in every direction. Contemporary accounts claim that the field of impaled bodies extended for about 2 kilometers in length. Modern historians debate the exact number. The truth is, probably between 15,000 and 20,000 impaled bodies. But here is what makes your skin crawl. It was not random. The poles were arranged according to geometric patterns, concentric circles radiating from the capital in perfect order. In some sections, star shapes were visible from high ground. Vlad had spent weeks preparing all this. Some of the bodies had been dead for weeks, others had been impaled more recently, and some, according to multiple sources, were still alive. The Ottoman troops, the same warriors who had conquered Constantinople, began to vomit. Some refused to move further forward. Others started to desert. And in the center, on the highest pole of all, was Hamza Pasha, a high-ranking Ottoman commander. His body was dressed in his finest clothes. He was positioned directly in front of the route the Sultan's column would take, a personal message from Vlad to Mehmed. Sultan Mehmed II, the man who watched Constantinople's walls crumble under his cannons, stood still for several minutes. The most widely accepted response comes from the chronicler Chalcocondyles. It is not possible to deprive of his country a man who accomplished such great things. This was not praise, it was recognition. The Sultan was acknowledging that he faced something he did not fully understand. Within days, Mehmed ordered general retreat. He left a contingent commanded by Vlad's brother Radu to continue harassing him, but the Sultan himself withdrew with the main army. The most powerful empire in the world had invaded a small principality with overwhelming force and had been repelled. Not by military superiority, but by pure psychological warfare. Vlad the Impaler had won. But the story does not end here. Because what happens next reveals the final tragedy. That terror, however effective in the short term, always devours those who wield it. Vlad could not stop. The methods that defeated the Ottomans did not stop with the Ottomans. He used them on everyone. Toward the end of 1462, Vlad was impaling merchants for alleged price gouging. He was impaling boyars suspected of disloyalty. He was impaling entire villages for minor infractions. His political position deteriorated rapidly. In November 1462, just months after his greatest triumph, Vlad was forced to flee into Hungarian territory. He was imprisoned by King Matthias Corvinus of Hungary. He spent 12 years in captivity, but in 1476, he had an opportunity. Vlad reclaimed the throne in November 1476. He had perhaps 2 months to rule. In December 1476, or January 1477, Vlad was killed in battle against an Ottoman force near Bucharest. His head was severed, preserved in honey, and sent to Sultan Mehmed in Constantinople as proof of his death. After all the terror, Vlad ended up as a trophy displayed in the capital of the same empire against which he had fought his entire life. So what do we make of this story? In Romania, Vlad is often celebrated as a national hero. For the rest of the world, especially after Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, Vlad became synonymous with vampirism and supernatural horror, which in a way lets him off the hook. It is easier to think of him as a monster, as something inhuman, than to confront the real horror. Because the real horror is this. Everything Vlad did was human, painfully, terrifyingly human. He was not born a monster. He was created by a system that taught him that power comes from terror, and he took those lessons and perfected them to their extreme conclusion. The forest of impaled bodies was not madness. It was applied psychology, and here is what should keep you awake at night. It worked. Against all odds, using only calculated terror, Vlad repelled an empire. He proved that fear, properly weaponized, could achieve what armies could not. The question is not whether Vlad was evil. That is obvious. The question is, what does it say about human nature that this method was so effective? If you want to continue discovering uncomfortable truths buried in history, subscribe, because the darkest stories are not just about what happened, but about understanding why it worked, and that is knowledge we cannot afford to forget. If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with those who love history. Only through knowledge can we learn from the past. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video.